using
Testing. All right, we're going to get started, everyone. I'd like to welcome everyone to tonight's Lean Startup Circle featuring Hiten Shah and the team from KISS Metrics. So Hiten Shah created dozens of products before finding success with Crazy Egg and KISS Metrics. And tonight, Hiten and his team are going to teach you how getting lean helped them create winning products. So everyone, please welcome Hiten Shah.
How's everybody? You guys are to Facebook parties or anything like that? Did anybody here go to the conference? No? Really? Oh, you did, okay. Of course you did. So I actually want to start out with a question. Typical. How many of you have read Eric's stuff or somebody's stuff and are trying or have started implementing Lean Startup Principles? Cool. Well, I know we're at the Lean Startup Circle. Yeah, that would make sense. Awesome. How's it going so far?
Great.
Yeah, really? You sure? Yeah, you're telling the truth. Awesome. I just want to give you guys a quick background on myself for those of you that don't know me, and then we'll just dive right in. And then we're going to have our CTO as well as our head of products here to talk as well. So I won't be the only one boring you. So my name's Hiten Shah. I started my career as an entrepreneur we built a consulting company. We started a consulting company about 7 years ago. We were doing SEO, social media marketing, all that kind of stuff. That was good and bad. It was good because I got to see how a lot of companies operate, startups all the way to like Fortune 500 companies. It was bad because I kind of got stuck on the revenue coming in from that. We were always trying to build products and stuff, and we ended up hiring a bunch of developers. I say it's about 70 to 100. I don't know exactly what it is. It's definitely more than 50. So we hired 50 different development shops, individual designers and developers, and tried to build probably a few dozen products. And then we got lucky once out of those few dozen. It was at least 20 different products. And at that time, there was no formal customer development, no framework for like stages of a startup or anything like that we were doing, and we were distracted by a consulting company and all the money we made there. But we did keep trying to dump money into products. So that gives me a lot to talk about between a fat startup and a lean startup. So there's a big debate. I don't care about the debate. I have my own definition for this. I think you guys can probably understand where mine's coming from. Basically, fat startup versus lean startup, it's not about how much money you raise or you have. It's not about whether you're bootstrapping or not. And it's just all about eliminating waste. Any kind of waste you can think of in a startup, it's all about, as you progress forward, eliminating that waste and making sure that you're not just pouring money into something that's not going to be effective. There's a leaky bucket concept. There's a bunch of holes in the bucket. You're just trying to plug them in. I think that's a pretty good analogy for what a lean startup is compared to a fat startup. I've had many fat startups while I was in the consulting company, and I'll go through a few of those in a second. And the key here is also you want to buy yourself as many iterations as possible before running out of time and money in a lean startup. And I think a fat startup doesn't necessarily look at it like that, but I think my examples will help a lot more in terms of my definition of that. But that's kind of what I wanted to lay down first, which is it's not about how much money you have or bootstrapping or anything like that. I think anyone can be running a lean startup, and everyone should be, actually, no matter where you're at or what type of business it is or what type of customer you're going after or anything like that. Here's another point of fat versus lean. I kind of hate to say it, but then I think it's kind of interesting. When we first started building products, being a consulting shop and seeing a lot of customers, and also not really understanding how to build web-based products at that time, we always just had a lot of ideas, and we would just hire people to try to build them. Go over a few of those soon. And so I guess we always had a vision, and we always thought we knew exactly where we were going. And that's what I mean by we had a visionary roadmap. It was my roadmap, it was in my head. I didn't care what anyone said, that's where I was going. And for me, it was really about, at that time, I was blindly sticking to my vision. I wasn't really being flexible enough to learn and adjust as necessary. And so I think that was the biggest difference for me between these two things. And now, all about the validated learnings and not being stuck on my vision completely. There are certain parts of my vision that I won't change, or I wouldn't say won't change, but that are kind of more directional, but I'll get into that as well. So I think the ultimate statement that I thought of about this is basically creating a successful business is more important than sticking to a faulty vision. So it's really about understanding where the kind of holes are in your vision and kind of plugging them and moving yourself to be successful. We all want to build successful businesses, and that's what I'd say validated learnings and the lean startup principles are all about to me, is raising my chances of building a successful business. So, this is something I think about a lot. Almost every single product we tried to build in the consulting company, we would launch it once versus releasing all the time. So what that means is we would try for a big launch, try to get a lot of bloggers to write up on it, do a lot of PR, try to acquire a ton of customers before we validated a lot of the assumptions in our business. And then, one big thing I realized is huge launches like that are completely draining, whether that's on the business folks or people that are developing the product, because what ends up happening is you go for this goal, you have this date, you have this big old launch, maybe a bunch of people come, and then what? You're tired. You don't have any idea of how to continue. You're sitting there like, oh, I got this big bump, and now everything sucks because I don't have any more traffic, and I can never hit that scale again. I think being lean is about releasing all the time. You want to release and iterate constantly, and you want to do it based on observing customer behavior and feedback. And that's what a lean means to me compared to fat. So I'm going to get into the meat of it and talk about some of my failures first. And I think those were what I would refer to as fat startups for a number of different reasons. The first one. So, it was called Fruitcast. We built a podcast advertising network. And, things we didn't realize that we know now is there's a marketplace dynamic to that. So we need podcasters as well as we need advertisers for the business to work. That was something that I didn't really realize. It's commonly called the chicken or egg problem. And we had lots of hypotheses in the business, but we didn't validate any of them in a disciplined way to help us learn. Here's my proof of that. So this product was developed in 2 months. It was outsourced development, not offshore. It was in the U.S., but it was to a development shop that was our partner as well, and we launched it in 2005. And that, in the background, if you guys can see it, is actually a check that we sent out to a podcaster. So we were actually trying to make people money and trying to make money ourselves. So I think that's something that we did right, and we did follow some of the lean principles in that, so to speak. But we did a lot of things wrong, and here's one of them. So Michael Arrington caught wind of it, and he wrote about it. And this is what he said. So basically, he said, that's a hefty $250 CPM to the advertiser. This is what we were paying out to the advertiser, or charging the advertiser and paying out a certain percentage of that to the podcaster, just like a typical ad network. And he basically said, this is way above what radio stations charge for ads. We didn't know that. We should have known that. We should have known a lot of things, but this is one thing we should have known. So, Michael Arrington from TechCrunch was much smarter than us about our own business. What we did was we just set an arbitrary price. We had no idea, no vector on it. We did try to iterate a little bit on the price unsuccessfully, and we also didn't bother to talk to any advertisers first. We barely even talked to podcasters. We thought we knew them. We kind of, listened to their podcast and said, oh, this is a cool idea. We'll build an ad network for them. But I'm sure all of you have heard the story of Odeo and Twitter, so yeah, bad idea. And we were trying to build an ad network out of it, which was even a worse idea. And then this is what ended up happening. This is an email from one of the founders of Fruitcast, and basically we were hoping for something magic to happen. Magic didn't happen. So and we shut it down in October of 2006. The vanity metrics on it were, the biggest one is, for a period of about, I think, 6 months, we were ranked #1 for podcast advertising. But it didn't matter, and it still doesn't matter. There's one company, podtrack.com, with a TRAC, that I think is making a little bit of money right now. That was about it. So, market was bad. I think I would have done it a lot differently. So let me give you guys kind of an idea of how I would have done it differently today. So since we have a marketplace, we have 2 different groups of people that we're trying to please, or that are our customers. We have advertisers and we have publishers or podcasters. So what we would have done is really done customer interviews and surveying to really understand whether our assumptions or our hypotheses are correct. And so basically the process would be we'd write down all our hypotheses around both those customers, things like the price they're willing to pay, what their pains are, and we build out some survey questions, whether it's ones that we call these advertisers about, or set up a landing page and throw a bunch of podcasters at it, and kind of validate those assumptions, and then from there decide whether we should move forward. I think in this case, if we would have taken that approach, we would have saved ourselves 2 months and $45,000. Yeah, it's a big deal. And maybe it would have cost $500 or $1,000 to run that survey, but we would have saved ourselves a lot of pain and trouble, and also a year of time. We did spend a whole year trying to work on the product. And in this case, we wasted money, but we didn't waste that much time of actually focusing on this product. And I'm going to give you guys another example. This is just 2 of 20, but this is the second one. We built the first social media monitoring tool. It was called surf.com. Weird spelling, but it was cool at the time. And we had the tagline track buzz in real time. I think this was the first social media monitoring platform. There's a number of businesses that are super deep businesses that have done this, but it was a very similar approach to Fruitcast in the sense of we had the idea, we found a developer. This time we brought him in-house, and we tried to build this thing. This is what happened. So we spent 7 months. It was one developer. It was 15 grand. We were doing sort of a test with him as a younger guy. He's still with us today, thankfully. And we launched in 2007. And this is kind of this is like 2 years of Google Analytics data. So it was a semi-significant business in some ways where I'm sure we could have done something with it if we felt like it. But I guess we didn't pursue it. And I think it took way too long to even put it out there. And it didn't cost that much money, so I think that's something that wasn't as big of a mistake as last time. Another thing is, I think the biggest lesson I learned on this one is that we were scared to charge customers, so we wanted to give it all away for free. We had no idea about charging customers or even wanting to. It was just a search engine. And I think in hindsight, we would have looked at the business differently if we had understood what the pains were in the market a little bit better. We thought we did because we had a consulting company, we had all these customers, and they told us they wanted something like this, so we just built it. And I think that the key lesson here to me was paying customers is a strong signal, and you might as well try to charge customers and see what happens, even if it's a business where it might not seem as logical at first. So, for example, there were people on this system doing thousands of searches a day. I'm sure we could have charged them for something, or even asked them if they were willing to pay for something. That probably would have been the key kind of thing that I would have tried in this business, as beyond just like coming up with a better, more iterative, kind of lean approach to building the product. And this is a product that's been built in a month. It's just, so it dead cooled a year later, or 2 years later. And the only reason we killed it is because of servers. We canceled them. We didn't want to pay for them anymore. We didn't really care about the product anymore, as you guys can guess. So because of this and a few other experiences, very painful experiences, I'll give you a story of my worst one. We tried to build a hosting company. We spent $500,000 trying to build a hosting company. We never had one customer. So that's why if all of you guys whoever was here last time saw Sean's presentation about moving up the pyramid. So I think whether it's this approach or some other approach onto like understanding what stage you're at in your business, it's really important to really know that, because you have different goals and different things you want to accomplish at each stage in the process. So I'm a heavy believer in this, and I think that it's a good way to kind of follow kind of the lean startup principles and plug into kind of this model, which is if you're a product market fit and you're still trying to figure out whether people even care, there's different things that you should be doing, which is mainly iterating on product and not so much worrying about customer acquisition or even trying to scale customer acquisition or anything like that. And then obviously, I'm sure all of you guys know this, build, measure, learn. We basically are trying to live by that in our company at this point, and I think we're making a lot of progress doing that. So that's why I'm excited about what Eric's done and everything. Now I'm going to get a little more specific into a couple MVPs that we did as part of KISS metrics. I'll talk about our vision a little bit, because that'll give you guys an idea of like the parts that have kind of stuck. So our vision was, I'm also going to be talking more about our pivots on Friday, so I didn't actually include that. Friday is Eric Reese's conference. I'm going to talk about all the specific pivots we went through, but this is kind of a preview of that real quick. Basically, we wanted to build analytics products for today's web-based businesses, no matter what kind they were. It could be iPhone apps, social web applications, software as a service businesses. That was kind of our primary goal. Second was we wanted to provide actionable analytics, which is something that we believe didn't exist in the market and happens to be true still. We validated that many times over. And the goal was to charge customers for the product. I think that's the biggest one that's different that I don't think that we were pretty much stuck on that wouldn't change. And I think we picked something that was reasonable. And we validated that a few times over, even looking at companies like Omniture, which got acquired for almost $2 billion, which are in the analytics space, and things like that. Because there's a lot of different ways you can go with analytics in terms of charging customers or helping them make more money on ads or something. But our goal was to charge customers and build a software as a service product where we could charge a monthly or a yearly fee. And another key vision for us, which is not going to change either, drastically at least, is we wanted to acquire customers online and convert them online. So huge sales and marketing budgets and things like that, like hiring hundreds of people selling for us, it wasn't really, hundreds of people in-house selling for us isn't really a primary goal for us. And that's something that we're not going to change anytime soon because we, one of the biggest companies, Omniture, in the space, they're a sales and marketing organization and they're not very product focused as much as they claim to be because all they're about is selling. Not that we don't want to sell, we just would rather sell based on the merit of our product. So based on that, I'm going to go through some early kind of MVPs that we did in KISS metrics, but these are not these were more to learn. This wasn't really MVPs on our core product. They were more to learn, do some really early testing to understand kind of what people wanted and stuff like that. First one was called daily.io. So basically, our hypothesis was that people are willing to pay for daily metrics emails. So basically, one problem we found from talking to early customers or early users of Google Analytics, early meaning early for us, is that they don't check their email. They don't check. Yeah, they check their email all the time. They don't check their analytics that often, and they don't even check it weekly. The majority of customers that Google Analytics has. So we thought people would be willing to pay for an email in their inbox where they got actionable metrics. So instead of building this product, which is what I would have done a few years ago, we decided to create a landing page. This is a landing page. If you go to daily.io, you'll see it. It's live and we still get responses. I'll bet I'll get 20 or 30 after this, responses on our survey. So we put out a survey. So this is a landing page. You hit the get started button and there's a survey on the next page. And then I think there's a random thank you page that shows up. This simple MVP, as I call it, which was mainly to validate our assumption that people are willing to pay for these daily metrics emails, took 2 hours, one developer, and we collected the survey data for about 1 week. It's still up, so we're still collecting it. But we got about 148 respondents in that, so fairly significant sample size, and these are all just random people. Excuse me. These were the results. The basic thing was, this is one of the questions we asked, which is, how much are you willing to pay for daily.io? So we did explain to them what it is, and then we asked them this question amongst 5 or 6 others. And basically what we realized is that this actually used to be higher. It was about 50% previously. And basically 50% of people only use free tools is what they told us. And with this product, we were targeting a mass market. So that made us realize that this is probably not a good idea to pursue for the kind of product we wanted to build and the kind of revenue we needed to make on it. So basically, we determined people aren't willing to pay for it. And so it saved us a tremendous amount of time and resources from building anything further. And we did that in 2 hours and 1 week of finding ways to throw traffic at it. We didn't have to pay for the traffic because we have our Twitter accounts and stuff like that. But we did, if I were to pay for the traffic, it wouldn't have been about more than $100 to $250 to validate that. People always ask me that, so I figured I'd address it. So we ran a lot of these types of MVPs, a lot meaning 5, 6, 7, 8 MVPs like this, and that helped us really decide what the important problems in analytics were to solve, and has led us to kind of where we're at today with the product. And yeah. And next up is a MVP that's kind of a personal project of mine. I end up doing those and get in trouble by Cindy, our product manager. This was before her No, I'm just kidding. It wasn't. So
He
it's
did
called
this while I was
Purity.
on maternity leave.
Yeah, that's what happened. That's right. That's right. So it's called ShareFeed. And I can justify it. I will justify it. But I just want to give an example of something that we just built. It's another MVP. It has very little to do with the core product or our core, customer thing. But we kind of needed it. I needed it. So I jacked some resources and made it happen. But basically, it's a Twitter scheduler, and it started out as an MVP. This is what the MVP let us do. It basically, this is where we are today. So we have 21,000 followers, 4,400 tweets. The biggest reason that we even started building this thing is because I realized that sharing links on Twitter helps grow an account, and in our case also helps us attract early adopters, which is a big deal. And it's inexpensive to cheap to grow these accounts as long as you're willing to put in some time and effort. And you also get a good following because for our specific type of product, our early adopters are actually on Twitter, and a lot of our competitors are. So this was the first version of the scheduler. We don't use it anymore, but it basically was a bunch of PHP code that was installed on a server. It took one of our developers one day to build, and it helped us get to 7,500 Twitter followers. And basically, based on this and just a lot of people like asking us for kind of access to it, so we gave a bunch of people the code and stuff, and also people like not knowing how to install it and stuff like that, made us want to kind of pursue it a little further. Plus, it had a key feature that we wanted to add and couldn't add based on the way we built it. So we basically turned it into an actual product. This is actually the interface in the product. And it was also an opportunity for one of our designers to learn object-oriented programming. He's also a programmer, so I had a really good excuse. And again, Cindy wasn't around. I didn't get in trouble, at least when we built it. And so basically, the key functionality, which I think would be worth describing, I think some of you guys in the room probably use the product, but basically, I had a core problem, which was I'd find links across, as I'm like kind of surfing the net, and I'd go put them in like a note, like a text file that I keep on Dropbox, so it's synced across my computers. And once a week, I'd go in and try to schedule all these tweets using like Hootsuite or CodeTweet or one of those systems. So once we had our scheduler built, I started using that, which was the Ghetto PHP one you guys saw. But then I had one problem, which was I wanted to get rid of the text file, and I just kept wondering why I didn't have a bookmark list. And so what ended up happening is we added a bookmark list to this. So you basically drag a bookmark list to your browser. You can put it on all your computers, and you just when you find a link, you just click the button, and it saves it to drafts. And I go in once a week now, and I just schedule it, and it's very lean, very simple, and it's saved me about 2 hours per week. And this product took 1 week, one developer, and it saved me a lot of time, so I can kind of justify building it. But there's another reason why it's good for us. But basically, in this case, for both those MVPs, we progressively developed the product, and basically we were our own customers, and we didn't care if others didn't want it because we really needed it and wanted it, and it was very beneficial to our business. So right now it's in private beta, and we're letting people in slowly. But the thing that makes me excited about it is we have a pretty good product market fit. So for those of you that don't know what this is basically, this is Sean Ellis's kind of score to figure out whether you have product market fit and can move up kind of the pyramid he had. And, excuse me. So he says that if you have 40% or more of the people who fill out the survey, and that if 40% or more of the people say they'd be very disappointed, you can kind of move up the ladder to like growth and things like that. So to our amazement, actually, or my amazement, people actually care about this product, and we're thinking of opening it up and actually adding a premium plan. We've spent a total time of 2 weeks so far, and we'll probably spend about another week of time to make it have a premium kind of offering. Yeah, so that's it. Those are our 2 MVPs and a bunch of other stories. And Cindy's up next to talk about our newest product and kind of how we went through the MVPs on that.
So, talk about KISS Insights. Property. Bedtime. And in some cases, you go out and you build something and you're really lucky. In a lot more cases, you spend a lot of time building something and no one really wants it. And just as a little background for me, I came from bigger startups where I'd spent a lot of time building products that, in my opinion, were great products, and the people who used them thought they were great products, but there wasn't a market for them. And so a lot of effort and time went into products that, once they got into someone's hands, they loved it, but it was a B2B2C model where, the B in the middle didn't really want to buy it, and so not enough people got to use it. And so I started using lean startup tactics, although I didn't know what they were called at the time. We've been a much larger organization to validate demand for things, before our execs got their hearts set on building them and, spending 6 months of a waterfall cycle getting them done. So, survey.io, a lot of people here probably use this. This is a really simple tool that we built based on the Sean Ellis Customer Development Survey. It's just one survey. You can grab the code, stick it on your site. It'll ask 8 questions that are designed to determine if your product has product market fit. So a lot of people use this, a lot of people are happy with it, and it was a pretty quick thing to build. It took 5 days, one developer. We've got over 2,000 people who signed up. And when we talked to them about how much they liked it, we found that actually people love it a lot. We have over 50% of people who say they'd be very disappointed if they couldn't use it. But this is where there's kind of an important lesson, which is technically you can have product market fit, but still not have something that you can charge people for. Because when it came down to, people would be very disappointed if survey.io went away, but that doesn't mean that they would pay for it. It's pretty much a single-use product. You put it on your site once, maybe you do it once a year, but how do you charge for that? You put 75 cents in the tip jar every time you use it? It's basically a charging for content problem. And so we had this sense that there was a problem here that we were solving, that we could turn a product, we could create a product out of this, but we weren't there yet. So, one of the things that I did is start talking to people who were using it to find out why they're using this and what are their problems around traditional surveys and market research. And I got, a couple of strong answers. People said, I don't know what questions to ask. They said, I don't want to write questions. I suck at writing. I don't want to write things and then, sound dumb. Or people would say, I write up surveys and then 2% of people respond. And that doesn't really seem worth my time at all. And so one of the things we thought was, we latched onto that notion that people don't like writing. And so we started working on kind of our next iteration of this, where we had some pre-written survey templates. And this is actually, the point at which I joined KISS Metrics is, I did some work with Hiten to develop these. And I went out and I talked to people of a bunch of different companies and said, what are the types of questions that you'd like to ask? And, we came up with a bunch of templates, and people were excited about this again. I don't want to write stuff. I love that you guys have put out survey templates for us. So we started building this. Took about 3 months, 2 developers, 50% time. But there was still that problem nagging at us, which was essentially that the differentiator between this beta.survey.io product and other survey products was content. And we've all kind of seen how poorly charging for content goes. So in my mind, we were at a little bit of an impasse. I'm sure he can still have grand plans, but in my mind, I was like, this isn't really a product that we can move forward with. I don't want to build a competitor's survey monkey. There already are a bunch of them, and then, this is kind of a crowded market. But as I was doing more of customer development for KISS Metrics, we started coming back to a few things over and over again that people were saying, just as I was asking, how are you collecting feedback in general? And they said, it got back to when I fill out surveys and I send them out to people, I get a 2% response rate, and that's crappy. Or when I write a survey, I'm pretty sure I'm asking way too many questions, and someone sees it and they get overwhelmed and they don't even respond. Or, when we got into what tools people were using, a lot of folks said, I'm using Git satisfaction, I'm using user voice, but I'm not really happy with what I'm getting out of that. And I said, well, when you hear this in the customer development sense, you're like, tell me more. What do you wish you could be doing? And, the question I like to ask a lot is, if you had a magic wand and you could do anything with this product, what would you want to do? And, there we go. And that is what led us to KISS Insights. Basically, people said, I'd like to be able to ask questions only of my paid customers or only of my logged in users. Or, I want to ask something or get feedback on a specific page. If someone says, this sucks, in my user voice window. I don't know what page they were on when they said that. So I don't know what in my interface made them so angry. You know, I don't know. I don't care if people say they think my interface should be pink and blue. I want to know which of these three things should I be pursuing that'll be most valuable to you. And so, you know, we've worked on this product that it's an embeddable survey. It pops up on your site. You ask one, maybe two questions at a time. So it's pretty unobtrusive. It's so short that honestly it takes as much time to dismiss it as it does to fill out the survey. So your customers just go ahead and fill it out. And it gives people the control that they were lacking before. And basically, we built an internal MVP for this in 2 days because I sat with our developers or sat in a chat room with our developers and said, look, I don't care how we do it. It can be hard-coded. It can be an image for, you know, with an image map for all I care. But I just want us to be able to stick little surveys up on our site on KISS metrics and have people respond to them and see what happens. And we cranked that out in 2 days, and it was ugly. It was ugly enough that I had to, you know, be on chat with Hiten telling him to calm down. But we got emails from people saying, what is that thing on your site? I want it on my site. And so we proceeded to our public MVP, which took us about 2 months. As of before we left the house today, we had over 700 signups. And I've been getting emails from every day from people asking when they can pay us for it, which is music to my ears. So this is, you know, we'll move on to the solution after this. But, you know, basically, one of the things that I think is really critical here is that you never know when customer development is going to come to you. So basically, you know, in my mind, this was kind of a, you know, push to the side project. And it was doing ongoing customer development and always being listening that led us to a new product that actually is coming to market incredibly fast. But, you know, if we kind of plunged ahead with our first idea, or even our second idea, we would have spent a lot of time, and it would have looked like, you know, the first stories that Hiten told you about, and instead, we actually built something out pretty fast. And actually, you know, one of my favorite little exchanges from this is when we had the first public MVP up, the very first iteration of it, it's on chat with Hiten, and he was like, And I said, well, it's a very MVP, you know, but that was enough. So that's how we got to that, and if you haven't already been there, beta.kissinsights.com, you should check it out. And now John will talk to you about how he builds the stuff that we find out about.
Flattering shot. Hi, I'm John Butler. I'm the CTO for KISS Metrics. And I want to talk a little bit about the solution side of things. So Sandy talked about problems and how to identify, you know, what are the key problems to solve. Well, then once you have a problem, it's like, hey, you know, this is a real issue for customers. You got to go about solving it. And that leads you to the solution team. And so I've been an engineer, you know, for a long time. I've got a lot of engineers in the room. And engineers, you know, our whole job is to solve problems. We love to solve problems. Like, it doesn't matter if it's a crossword problem or a Rubik's Cube or an engineering problem. Give us a problem, we'll try to figure out a solution. And I've always thought of myself as an engineer that my job was to find the optimal solution for a given problem. So whatever problem you give me, I will try to find the very best solution for it. And, you know, the better solutions I can get, the better I'm doing at my job. Well, after working with the lean startup stuff, I started to realize that, you know what, my job is actually not to find the optimal solution for a given problem. It's to find the minimum solution for a given problem. So I talked a little bit more about what that means. I'll give you an example which I think illustrates that really clearly. He's mentioned some other products. I'll give you another example of you know, sort of fat to lean thing. And he again is going to talk about more of these things on Fridays. But anyway, so a fat version of KISS Metrics, we built this thing in 6 months. We set this cluster of co-located dedicated servers. We licensed high-performance database software. We wrote sophisticated backend architecture, and I literally spent months writing and optimizing C code. And I was working very hard to make sure that this product would be able to do all the things we wanted to do. There would be, you know, extremely flexible architecture, handle high amounts of data, do all this great, wonderful stuff. I mean, you know, I was so proud of my code. You know, I had all this optimization results, and you know, spent way too much time in the profile. And the result was nobody cared, right? Nobody cared that I was using the latest research and hashing algorithms. Nobody cared how flexible my thing was. Nobody cared how many edge cases I could solve because nobody cared about the product itself. It didn't matter how beautiful and how wonderful my solution was because, you know, it wasn't solving the right kind of problem. Nobody cared. So, you know, it's really easy, I think, if you're looking at Eric's stuff, you're looking at the problem team, solution team, is really great. You might sit back as an engineer and say, well, you know what? I built you a perfect solution. You just gave me the wrong problem to solve. That's not my fault. I'm sorry. My solution was beautiful. So you just gave me the wrong thing to solve. And it's really easy to do that, but I think that's the wrong attitude to take. Basically because a lot of this was my fault. The only reason that it took 6 months development time was because of me. I was so set to build this ideal, perfect solution that it took 6 months to build it. And that entire 6 months, no one could do any learning, right? They'd be like, hey, John, what's going to get done? But they couldn't put things in front of customers. You know, they could interview some people and things like that, but it took a whole 6 months where no one did any learning. And that was pretty much 100% my fault for trying to build this perfect solution. So the next version of KISS metrics, we took 1 month. Like I said, he will talk about other reasons we made this pivot. But we use EC2, S3, Ruby, and SQLite. Yes, we did actually use SQLite. It was horribly slow and ugly. I mean, this was, well, you can see it actually took 7 servers to keep up with our first 30 users. 30 guys, 7 servers, Those are actually like EC2 large instances, if I remember correctly. So obviously, like, this was not like the most awesome code ever written, right? Kind of roughly like 1.5 guys per server. So, yeah, not great, obviously, right? But it only took 1 month. And what we did is we spent the next 2 months learning before worrying about it. I was like freaking out. This is the worst code ever. This is ridiculous. We're adding all these servers. Spent a whole 2 months learning before worrying. One of our beta customers' data was actually 44 days behind. There's only like 60 days in 2 months. Things that we were only like 15 days, and then it started like getting slower and slower, right? But I didn't worry about it. Like that was the hardest thing for me. I was like, oh my god, this thing is horrible. Like it's so bad, But we didn't worry about that guy. We're like, hey, sorry. I literally wrote an email and be like, hey, sorry, but if you sent us more data than we were anticipating, and it wasn't important for us to solve that problem right then. We had all these other issues that we had to solve. We didn't have to solve the scalability problem. We had to learn, is this product really valuable? Like, are we really on the right track here before spending, time getting rid of that SQLite database and all that stuff? So, now, we've gone back. After we spent that 2 months, we started to realize, yeah, we're on to something here. The whole 6 months we were trying to build this end-all thing, that was a total waste of time. Complete waste of time. Beautiful code, but waste of time. This 1 month crappy thing written with Ruby and SQLite, like, we learned a ton from that. One of the things we learned was we were on the right track. Like, this was something that people liked. People were like, hey, I really like this. It was a really simple product. So then what we did is we then did spend the time to optimize it, obviously. We had to, do that at some point. But we didn't do that until we learned this was something valuable. And so now we've got like 2 servers. We literally handle hundreds of millions of events per day. Excuse me, not per day. We handle hundreds of millions of events. No one's data is behind by more than an hour. So quite an improvement there. And so the key lesson here is not to say, wow, John was really good at optimizing stuff. He went from SQLite to this, and now he's handling so much more data, and now everything's handling. That's not the key lesson that, wow, an engineer can optimize something. I think the key lesson from this is that people will put up with crappy, slow, buggy software if there's something valuable at its core. And I think that's really hard for engineers to do. I think it's really hard for engineers to be like, put something out there early before it's really ready. You want to put out like the perfect thing before you put it out in front of someone's eyes. I was like, oh my god, this is horrible. But I think Twitter's kind of a poster child for that. Like if people think about that. Like look where Twitter is today. If it was all about perfect code that was always stable and scaled well, then someone would have swooped in and beaten them at it. But that is not what they were good at in the beginning at all. So I think that's something to keep in mind when you're doing this. So one of the things that you come up with, this problem team, solution team stuff is you start thinking, well, what features should we build? And what should we include in the product? What can we not? And oftentimes this is like a back and forth. Usually what happens is, someone like Hiten, like a visionary, is like, I want to build this feature, and the developer goes, I don't want to build that feature, or you sit there and argue back and forth. And usually it's just basically, what's that principle? Oh, Amazon has a reference to it. But basically, the HIPPO. Has anyone heard that term? Yeah, basically the way decisions get made is the HIPPO policy, which is the highest paid person in the room. So that's what gets done, right? You sit around and get a bunch of people, and everyone's arguing. Well, what you end up doing is what the highest paid person said to do. So now we take a different approach. So should you build feature X? Well, we'll ship a buggy or a poorly designed version and see what happens. Now you're like, what? I don't know if you should do that. Like, do you actually write a poorly designed on purpose? The thing is, say you have some feature X, and you say, well, I could build a perfect version of feature X, perfect, all inclusive, in 5 days. And I might come back and say, well, I can build a really crappy version of that exact same feature in 1 day. And so In my version, I like the line feature, I have bugs, I have a lame design, UI designers will troll their nose at it. But if it only takes me 1 day to build a version of that, that means that in 5 days, the same amount of time that you can build one feature, I can build 5 features. So the same amount of time that you can learn whether one feature works, I can learn whether 5 features are valuable or not. So I'm going to learn 5 times as much as you are by building buggy, poorly designed things. So, I'm proud to admit that I purposely deployed poorly designed features in flexible, short-sighted code, half-done features, and no bugs, and traffic bugs, and major performance issues. So, a lot of people are like, oh, never invented any of that. But, I am proud to actually have, to admit that I have done this. And why am I proud? Why is this guy up here like admitting that he's doing all of this, right? Well, because I believe that the only path to perfection is iteration. Okay? I mean, I'm not smart enough to get it perfect the first time, right? There's no way that I'm going to be like, get everything right 100% the first time. And neither are you. You are not smart enough either, right? So the only way to do that, to increase the number of iterations you get, is to decrease development time. And the way to increase development time is, you don't have to make everything perfect the first time. And that was really, really, really hard lesson for me as an engineer to accept and swallow. So, if you're trying to do this problem solution thing, I would highly encourage you to push your developers to it's okay to ship things, that might have some bugs or might not be perfect. And because we have such short development cycles, I don't worry about it, right? I don't worry about the fact that I might be shipping something, kind of crappy on Monday, because if it was really valuable, on Tuesday I'll have already put out a better version of it, because I don't have to sit here and plan out the perfect version from day one. I iterate on them slowly. And some might be wondering, wait a minute, John just said he does all this stuff right here. Does that mean that KISS metrics is full of all this crappy core code, right? And that's kind of weird. I don't know if you should be admitting that up here. But I would throw a question back to you and ask, when was the last time a customer emailed you and was like, dear company, I was going to use your competitor, which had all the features I wanted, but then I found out how beautiful your code was. And I decided to switch and use you. Nobody cares what your code does. No one sees it. Customers care about the experience of the product. So, obviously, we do optimize things where we need to. And one of the ways we get away with shipping buggy stuff is because we're really rigorous with unit testing. So we know we're not going to break anything major. We're also really careful with, we design systems and processes that allow us to do that kind of thing and get away with it. And it's really important in that MVP page. Obviously, when we're getting ready to ship live and all that, we're going to have to make some adjustments. But what's great about it is by the time we do ship live, because we've gone through all these iterations, we're going to be really confident in the product that we've already built. And so then we'll be able to double down and say, yeah, these are the key areas we're going to need to focus on. As opposed to the other approach, which is where I was sitting there going, what are all the possible things we could do? I better build a perfect version of that can do all these things and sit here and spend 6 months developing something. Now, we spend a very short amount of time and then iterated on it. I think that pretty much wraps up my main focus, because that was one of the biggest things for me to get over for the lean startup process, was accepting things that aren't perfect. And that made a big difference for me, along with a lot of other things in there, lean startup principles. But that was my main point. So, thank you. Oh wait, there was a question answer thing? Yeah.
So we're going to do some quick Q&A, and a few people wrote it ahead of time, so they get to ask their questions first. So I don't know how to pronounce your name, but is it Barce or Barce? B-A-R-C-E? Here? I guess then I'm good to go first. Tom?
That's me. Tom's right there.
Yep, there you are. So go ahead.
My question was, one of the key parts about lean startups is really understanding the right metrics to measure. And how do you guys think about developing the right metrics across the company?
So, developing the right metrics, obviously, we're a metrics company, so we value good metrics. And one of the key things is that when you're doing metrics, is you can always get distracted by vanity metrics. Be really careful not to do that. Like, one of my favorite things was like, how many API calls have we had for our service? I love watching that one go up, because it goes up really big. It's really exciting to watch that one, but it makes no difference to our company. So one of the processes that we did with Eric, Hiten and I were fortunate to go through a lean startup cohort with him, is he forced us to sit down and write a business model that basically listed out these metrics. It was a real simple formula. And we sat down and we said, okay, for us, we're a product that we charge on, so on a monthly basis. We're gonna have some number of people who are gonna come to our site, and so many are gonna sign up, and so many do this, and so on and so forth. We have all these little metrics that we have to figure out. And then what we did is we sat down and we had to find baseline numbers for those. And then we moved through this process of setting goals and iterating on them. But when we're defining those metrics, we have to be really, really careful to be really specific. So, for example, login rate. How often do people log into our product? That's one that we feel is going to be important for us to have at a high rate, because if people aren't constantly logging back into our service, they're unlikely to keep paying us on a monthly basis. But we had to be really careful how we define that metric. Because if we went to Google Analytics and pulled out their number, it might not be very accurate. So we wanted to make sure that it was a measurement that was going to be based on a cohort that was constantly changing. Because that's the other thing, we're always trying to improve our product. So we want to make sure that that metric is based off of the last so many people who kind of come through our system, so that we can kind of see it going up.
The people who joined earlier might have not come back, and therefore any improvements you've done might not be affecting their behavior.
Right, and you also have the problem, you always adding more users, and it gets really, really hard to make any significant improvements because you have all these old users, that's an old metric in there. Another thing is that we had to be really, really hardcore about defining the exact definition of what it was, because we set goals. That's how we do our development process now. When we say okay, we'll do some sprint and say, here's the key metrics we're going to try to improve. We're going to try to improve the metric A, B, and C. We're going to try to get currently these values. We have 4 weeks to get into these values. So that's, Cindy will help with the problem team, she'll help identify what are the most important metrics for us to move. And then we sit down as solution team okay, we got to get from X% to Y% in this amount of time. How are we going to do it? And then we just keep pushing changes and changes and changes until we can try to get that number up. But in order to do that, again, you have to be really rigorous and concrete with your definition of what those are. Because otherwise, I'm really pretty decent at math, and so a lot of other engineers. It'd be really easy for me to fudge those numbers at the end if I wasn't really clear up front of what the exact metric was. So for our logged in rate, for example, it's what does it say? It's the last 100 users who signed up more than 2 weeks ago, how many have signed up in the last 7 days? So it's super specific, so that way when we try to move that number and we get to the end, we're not going, yeah, it went up because I included these people or something like that. So that would be my advice around that. Did I answer your question?
That's perfect, thanks a lot.
How about Mark? Mark Richards is here. There you are. Do you have a question?
Yeah, I think you answered it a little bit, but this question is probably the Cindy version of that question, in that in our portfolio companies, when they've had a breakthrough in revenue, typically, it seems like it's a lot of different things, but one thing that's always consistent is at some point they get really clear about the problem that they're solving and who has it, and the value of that problem. And there's a lot of ways you can arrive at that, but we drive them with some ways that we think get you there sooner. And so it's that, and so we try to force them initially to develop a hypothesis, just like you did with the metrics, but have it be about, okay, here's the specific problem that we think is we call it monetizable pain, right? And just form that hypothesis. You don't have to be right. But you need to go out and test it, and the stuff that Steve and Eric are talking about are exactly dead on. But you're not going to do it with a bunch of smart guys on a whiteboard. You're going to do it with customer meetings. So I'm curious how close you were to that idea when you were starting off, and then how that's evolved, and where you found the place where you're hitting the pain enough to get some people to pay.
So I think one of we didn't do this formally for KISS metrics. We kind of went back and did that after the fact. We had sort of an idea. Eric talked about customer archetype, so the kind of person that you think you're going to go after. My background originally was in interaction design, so we call those personas there. So we kind of had some rough personas, which is we think the people who are going to use this software product are product or technical co-founder types. We think it's going to be smaller companies, people who can get in there and change the code themselves, people who know pretty much what they want to measure and are pretty self-starting. And I think that was fairly accurate for our early adopter phase. But as we've added more people, and we knew this a little bit, but I was a little surprised by how much it's changed, that it's shifted a lot more towards product managers away from tech people. So I'd say about 75% of the people I talk to now can't change things on their site. They need to go ask a developer to do something for them. They don't necessarily know what they need to measure, and so us going in and kind of hand-holding them through the process and saying, this is what you should be measuring, is a big selling point for us. I think with KISS Insights, we did have a little bit stronger customer archetype, which so far has borne out pretty correctly, that it's product manager / marketing types. In the beginning, more product manager types, smaller companies, and who want to be able to take this into their own hands, as opposed to having to go to a marketing department or having to keep going to an engineer and bugging them. So I think, we've tried hard to kind of form those, and then when we talk to people, I ask people a little bit about their role in the companies, and, when they talk about this is how we do blah, 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 I kind of press on, do you do that? Do you have to ask someone else to do that? If you ask an engineer to do something, how long is it going to take for them to get back to you? And really kind of try and hone in on where that pain is.
The one thing I was going to add quickly was, Cindy wasn't around for some of the earlier versions of KISS metrics, but like relative to what we were targeting earlier to like where we are now, it's like completely different. I don't know if you two talked
I'll
about
talk about it on Friday.
on Friday, but
It is.
yeah.
And then it had to do with, I think partly vision and partly product. So, just to highlight this, I think the trouble you can get into with doing the archetype stuff is not having some sort of set vision on like, this is how I want to charge for the product. Just like you were saying, the monetizable thing. And I think for us, it's always been, we want to charge for the product. That's the way we're going to do it. And also, we want to not have to hire a lot of salespeople to sell the product. Those are the two premises. So we kind of kept shifting and pivoting until we figured out that this product fits with that, will fit with that with some tools.
Right. Like that first version of beta.survey.io, I'm sure we could have built it and tons of people would have used it. And they would have loved it. They never would have paid us for it, but they would have, they would have loved it.
So I have a question myself. Essential tenet of Steve Blank's philosophy is that you have to get outside the building to talk to customers. So do you guys have any specific examples where maybe you were planning a feature and then you talked to a customer and it completely changed what you were planning on doing? Or is it more that you have your own insights about what the product should be, you develop an MVP, and then you start a dialogue with customers based on people actually using it? Like, I wonder when you can build an MVP in 5 days, like, why go out and spend a lot of time talking to people when you can build it, give it to them, and then have a conversation?
Okay, so I do have a quick thing for this, which is, as soon as people see something, that immediately colors all of their responses. So I've just found, in general, when I show screenshots of something to a person and then ask them questions about it, their answers are much closer to, this is how I would use that thing you showed me, as opposed to if I switch the order and ask them questions first, they're like, this is what I do. And then if you show them something, they might say, I like it or don't like it. But once they see a picture, all their answers are kind of like, oh, well, if I had that, I would use it this way. But that hasn't answered the central question of, do I want it? Would I buy it?
Right, but I guess my point is, if you can do something in 5 days, you can just put it out there and see if they want it. And it sounds like in your case you did that. And then either people wanted things or they didn't want things. And then based on that, you started in the dialogue with them to like maybe follow on. And
I think the whole goal is how fast can you iterate. So I mean, we have a fairly small development team, so there is a limit to what we can do there. And while we're pumping out like these MVPs features, Cindy's actually going and interviewing people. So we already have like the next we're looked at like quite a bit. Like, okay, this is what we're gonna do next, and it gives us a lot of confidence moving forward. I mean, that's one of the things I really like about this whole process. Like I said, it took me a while to get over the engineering, trying not to build everything perfect. But I feel so confident when I move forward like every step because we actually do in a lot of times. Cindy will go talk to customers first. We have this general sense of what it is first. Then we build an MVP, and then we have to validate that and move on.
okay,
So
so you
dual
built
track.
specific MVPs based on having the discussion, and that gave you the sort of insight into what you wanted to build.
Yeah, we might have had a big vision, we think this is a good idea, this general thing, and then you talk to customers and you shape it up a little bit, and it just gives you a good idea of what you're going to build. Because even if you can pump something out in 5 days, that doesn't mean you necessarily want to build 100 different things and test them all. I mean, you run out of customers if no other reason.
And based on what you said before, you're concerned that building something and having them use it would then bias them away from giving you an answer that might lead to something better?
Yeah.
I mean, another thing is like, if you're spending development time building for 5 days and you could have got an answer on whether it was even worth it earlier or faster in like an hour, which you usually can, that's what I'd opt for. Because otherwise you're going to throw away that 5 days of code.
Sure, yeah. I understand the theory, and I like always hearing
examples, like a one
Okay,
thing
so,
in the
so
practice.
a very
like-
specific example that's close to specific is recently we actually had our whole team here. That's why John's here. He's usually in Oregon, in a box. He really does.
Well, I
Well, he's not driving.
Accent was drive for
Sounded better that way. So basically, we were an 8-person team, and there was 2 customers we kind of picked. They ended up being different types of customers for us, which was great. And the whole team went in there and saw them use our product. And that was getting out of the room for, I'd say, 6 of them. Cindy and I are always out of the building. Sorry.
Yeah.
We have the biggest thing that it's done for me is prioritization. I think for even the team, even John, like there's things I can tell him, and then when he's hearing it from a customer, or even one thing that Cindy commonly does is we'll have our customers like kind of screen cap for us. We don't even do the user testing stuff yet or anything like that. We just literally, she'll ask them to screen cap for us and they'll do it. And then then all the developers and everyone else will see the summary of it, because Cindy's good at that, but also watch the video.
So like a screencast of them using your product.
Yeah, and it's not even a usability thing, it's just like oh wow, someone's using it, and all this shit that I thought was great sucks really badly, right? So that's a good one if you don't want to get outside of the building exactly. But I think outside of the building has been huge in prioritization. Like there's features that all of us thought were good based on the interviews and thought that we should prioritize them as next. And now we realize, well, these other things are way more important to a customer when we hear them talk about it. And it's not necessarily something they're even telling us, it's just something that we're getting out of just hearing them, watching them use it. So.
All right, and so if anyone else has a question, they can just raise their hand now.
Would you like to do continuous deployment?
Yeah, that's really important for us to be able to push out features really fast, and that makes a big difference too, not really this whole push. Well, for KISS metrics, we actually have. Yeah, it's not for KISS metrics we do, not for KISS metrics, but
We're getting there.
so that's worked well for us. I mean, we just one of the things I think of is like how car designers do things. So when someone goes to build a car, they have to make it safe. So you'd have 2 options. If like your job was to build a safe car, you could either design a car that never crashed, right? Like design this car like this will never crash. It's gonna have like radar to sense everything. It'll like automatically dodge things. If it can't, like it'll hit the brakes, and if that won't work, it'll like jump over or something like that. You could try to design a car that would never crash, or you could simply design a car that it's okay if it does crash. It's gonna keep the occupant safe. And so that's what we did. That was one of the hard things for me was continuous deployment was like making, I'm kind of a perfectionist, and so like I was always code reviewing like everyone else's code before we would push it live. Well, there's only like one of me, so I had to do that like while I'm also trying to program, it became really cumbersome. And one of the principles of continuous deployment was that anybody could deploy, and that really freaked me out at first. So what I did though is instead of trying to design a thing that would like guarantee that nothing bad would get through, because I knew that was never going to work, something bad was eventually going to go through, we just made sure we designed a system so that when something bad would get through, it wasn't going to kill us. And so examples of that was obviously we had automated testing to try to catch everything beforehand, but we also designed the system so that when people do submit that code, it can't destroy everything. Because we have backups and things like that. So the systems are designed, and also we just use Nagios, and that's one that Eric recommends for monitoring everything, so that when someone does deploy something bad that did slip through a unit test, because the unit test can't cover everything, then we'll get notified, and it's okay to repair that system. So does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah, was it a lot of work and hard? I just feel like sometimes in startups, I'm not an engineer, but it just seems like it's hard to get people to actually do that.
Well, one of the things with Eric's thing is, again, the iterative approach was not only the development, but he does the whole 5 whys thing. Like when there's a problem, first ask why, then ask why again, ask why again. Do that 5 times, and then what you do is you take the simplest step. So we didn't go like, hey, we're doing this one way of deployment, we'll immediately switch completely to this whole new system. We're like, okay, let's make one thing different. So we made one little change. Like first I remember the first thing we did. I made a UI thing that we added more unit tests. We made a UI thing so people could go in and push things, and then we added more things to make more automated there, and then we started adding more Nagios notifications. So we just kind of did it slowly and built on all of that. You don't have to commit completely to it.
I mean, as a non-business guy, it's huge. Like anyone can deploy code. That's any developer.
Oh, yeah.
So I can get a copy chain in and get it deployed.
But yes, it is hard. On the KISS Insight side, we started slowly. We started with a Google Doc with test cases that I did manually. And then gradually, as engineers have time, they're automating those tests. So I go in every so often and test them to automate more of the tests. We're hoping to get to all of those automated, plus, more UI stuff and get it to where I can deploy. But we're not there yet.
So I was kind of just going to get what is the ideal KISS metrics?
Yeah.
to deal with.
Yeah. So I mean, for us, it's
Yeah, it's
more
like
Christmas.
different, like.
Yeah, we have more developers in KISS Insights right now.
Yeah.
And for me, I keep showing them the pain of not having that system, because when there's a change and it's going to affect customers, and that you trust me when I run it, I don't want to wait an hour for it to be deployed because we don't have that system. It's if
But
it's
we
done,
chose
it
to
should
put
be
out the
done.
MVP first. We could have done more continuous deployment
Yeah.
work, but
We
we
should, in
wouldn't have
hindsight,
700
we
signups
could
today.
have spent another week and wrote a lot of the unit tests and
Yeah.
spent some more time. I think it would have been valuable right now. So I highly encourage it. Good one.
David.
John, you're getting a lot of people really excited about your approach as an engineer. Those of us on the problem side, on the marketing side, we're like, how do we clone you? And my question very simply is,
I've been wondering that for years.
yeah, seriously. I mean, you went through a fairly significant conversion, it sounds, from the standard how a coder is trained to this lean approach. And for those of us that believe in that approach, you're a very hard resource to find. Because even if you find somebody that has exceptional coding skills, just knows how to do it, getting through the mindset change that you went through in a fairly short period of time is the real challenge, right? At least in my experience. So my question is, what do you think from your own personal experience can you say, look for these things in engineers that you're potentially going to hire, or try to steer them this direction so that you can get there in less than the 6-month experience that you had?
It's an interesting question because it's definitely a challenge for us actually too. Is trying to find. We're working on trying to figure out how to get.
There's a blog post coming.
Yeah.
Good.
Right? It's actually funny. He's actually told me he wants to write a blog post about that very topic. Yeah, it's tough. What qualities to look for?
And if that's too hard, then just, what were the things that flipped the bit in your mind that said, okay, this is an experience that I had that I don't want to go back and do that because X?
Well, I think the big thing is we went through huge periods of development time. He didn't talk about some of the worst cases in this slideshow. Because I've been working with Hiten for years. We went through this it was horrible to spend 6 months to a year to develop something, and then finally no one liked it. I mean, that was just soul crushing to me, And so then to go through the experience where it was 1 month and people are using it and we're getting this feedback and people actually liked it, that was just that small experience of because I was always so scared to push live. I'd be 6 months and then we gotta push it live and then see if it's gonna work or not, So, if you can, I would recommend that, I do think you could change it, most people will be able to change through this process when they see that it really works. And so the key would be let's just push this live and see what happens. I mean, that was, that was really hard for me to get over. Like I said, you saw that code was horrible. I mean, you didn't see the code, but you kind of got an impression it was horrible and it was really scary to push it, but we did it and, just getting the feedback and understanding, hey, this is real, that was what made a big difference to me. It was seeing it firsthand, that. And I did go through the lean startup training with Eric. I did go through some cohort stuff, but for me, the biggest single thing was the fact that I got something out in front of somebody live in 1 month and we got actual feedback and saw people like this one. I didn't have to spend 6 months to a year of my time,
And was that literally an epiphany for you, saying, wow?
Yeah, that single thing, that was
Okay.
it. And after that, I've been pushing super hard on everything. Let's just push it live. Let's just,
It's true.
yeah,
I was going to say, how often do you push things out now?
Multiple times a day, and it's only
How many times do you pull things back in, I guess?
That's the interesting thing, was I actually have yet to have to revert something. There hasn't been a major mistake that, we've pushed some bugs, but people put up with those bugs, it's surprising, that was a big lesson for me. We'll fix the things that people really care about, we push the bugs and, sometimes people complain on some things, sometimes people don't complain about anything. That was the other great thing for me was I sit there and spend all this time building this, the 5-day perfect version, when oftentimes that 1-day version was more than enough. So wow, I only had to spend 1 day on that. That was great. Instead of trying to spend 5 days on it, I got to do other stuff.
I think it's negotiation. It's being able to negotiate really well now. We did it really horribly in the past. Meaning what I mean by that is if you know you need something, you want something out as fast as possible, and you as a business guy or problem, however you want to look at it, you need to be able to negotiate and say, okay, we can cut that, this will come in my talk on Friday, but to do that in a month, forget all the buggy code and all that. It had no features. It had this bucket system of showing your data in 10,000 people buckets because I didn't win that battle, right? But it's good I did it because it would have took another 2 months to get it to work right.
That was one of the limitations. Hey, we're gonna do this in 1 month. I was well, we're gonna limit it to we'll only show you the last 10,000 things that happen.
And even before he started coding for the first week of planning this thing, every day I would probably ask him, hey, can we do it the other way? Can we do it the other way? So I think it's negotiation. It's as a business guy understanding what decisions you need to help engineers make so that they can go faster.
Stay now the rest of them.
But I mean, I think so. Yeah, I don't want to dominate, but I mean, at the end of the day, you will find that you will eventually hit potentially a personality barrier where the person's just not cut out to do it that way. And so maybe that'll be a topic for beers afterwards.
Gotta move on.
Yeah.
Or
Okay.
what I do is I beat him to death.
Well, I mean, and that's usually what happens,
One of
right?
my engineers, I'm in the process right now. I'm beating him to death, like, and then he's liking it.
I think you had a great shirt for Ron.
John, did you say you're in Oregon?
Yeah, I am.
And so our question, we're hiring a developer right now, and we have been looking local because of this iterative process. But so as far as working remotely, how has that worked out with such an iterative process?
Well, our development is actually very scattered. So we have one guy in Oregon, one guy in Arizona, one guy in Chicago. We've got these guys here. We've got Ian who's in Australia. I was in Japan for a little bit. We had one guy who was in Sweden. So we've actually been scattered this whole time. But it still works because that's one of the great things about like being startup principles, because everybody can like push stuff individually, and all this stuff. You just do a lot less coordination. So I didn't find it. We haven't found it to be an issue at all yet.
My question is for John. If you have developers pushing whenever they want, and you're pushing out features that they go out, maybe in the gray area, maybe they want to keep them, but you just push it out fast, how do you prevent the architecture from falling apart?
That's a great question. So one of the things is that, like I said, the first version we spent, the 1-month version was horrible architecture. And then after we spent 2 months learning, then I spent like 6 weeks, just threw everything away, and we just like re-architected it so it's clean. Because at that point, we had already validated that this was a valuable product. And at that point, that architecture is, that's, the much more prettier, more, flexible architecture. And for that, we found that most features that people want to change, don't really affect that. So we haven't really hit that problem too much because we already spent that 3 months, knowing that these are what's good and what's not. And we just chucked it, went over again, started over. So we haven't found we had to change our architecture much. So most of the feature changes are really minor around that. We know what we're getting into. Does that answer your question? Yeah. So you got any hands? Yeah.
How do you figure out pricing?
Great question.
Yeah, I'll talk on that.
I was gonna ask when to charge too.
So the most common way that you see is a lot of people are scared of like live testing pricing, but I wouldn't be scared. So what I mean is, show 3 different groups, different prices, and let them go through the credit card flow and kind of figure out what the demand is for each price point. So that's one way to do it. Another way to do it that I've heard is pretty common would be you pick a really high price point and then you put limited time coupons out there, and you basically, and these limited time coupons are for different discount points to get to the different price points you want to test, and you basically just, use that as a way to kind of test pricing. So that's basically the process that I would take. There's also surveying you can do and things like that. So I think the biggest thing in one of our older businesses, we never did price testing, and I know we're leaving at least 50% of revenue on the table because we never did that in the beginning. So, and all we had to do was just test it on the live site. It's not a big deal. The guys that there's some guys that are pretty big in SaaS. What they told me was what they did was if they were they would show you that they were charging you $29.99, but they would really only charge you $19.99 when the credit card got processed, and they were just trying to assess demand. So that's another way to do it. So I think actually testing on the live site as people are going through it is probably the most efficient way to do it.
That's a great idea.
And then do people actually end up paying the same price despite the fact that you're testing different prices?
Yeah, the nicest way to do it is just let them have that price and let them know after they kind of filled it out. But we really just want to know their behavior, right? Like if it's $19.99, $29.99, and $49.99, where's the kind of price elasticity there, and how can I maximize revenue?
That's the most valid responses. So like Eric will say someone like, hey, will you pay $29.99 for this? They're like, yes. Like, great, give me your credit card. I'm like, no.
So I think the credit card is a big deal.
You described a couple times building something in a month and then taking 2 months of learning. Can you describe a little more specifically what the learning processes were? What did you undertake? And from a development point of view, it seems a little trickier than from a market or product point of view where they might do customer surveys or something along those lines. So can you flesh that out a little bit for us?
Sure, yeah, because that was the main learning actually what was going on. Was Cindy They're talking to customers, we were putting customers in front of this crappy version, seeing like what they would like to do, and what were the things that like worked really well for them, what were the pain points that we weren't solving yet, and stuff like that. From the development side of things, it was
You guys
interesting.
support mails.
Yeah, I got a lot of support mails. Like, why is this thing? Like, why is my data so far behind? The other thing was we got to see like what features were being used. I mean, and what kind of use cases. It was really important for me for when I would go back to optimize that architecture later, because I could see like what kind of real data. Because I mean, one of the versions of KISS metrics, like we had been licensing this database software, but we had no real data. So like, how do you performance test something if you don't know what the real data is going to be? Like, I had no idea. I was like, this is what it will probably look like. So I made a bunch of sample data. Well, by having deployed that version in 1 month and then collecting data for 2 months, I had like millions and millions of data points that I could then go through and figure out like, okay, like how could we make this processing better and more efficient? So that was really valuable to me, to collect all the data to see how we could use it.
So we could see things like, what's the average size funnel people are creating? I mean, even little tiny things like that in the interface, you don't have to make a guess, because we could actually look, okay, there's one guy who created a 29-step funnel, but most of them are, 5 or under. So, John would get support emails from people asking, how can I do blah, 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 blah? And we would talk to kind of cross-reference that against customer interviews. So he might say, this company wants to do this and this and this. And I'd say, okay, they're the only company who wants to do that, because I talked to 12 people this month, and no one is even close to being that advanced. So for now, we'll treat them as an edge case. And if we start seeing more people like that, then we'll reopen it. But basically, that kind of weekly communication, I send out bullet points of my customer interviews, and whenever I started seeing patterns, then I might point those out. Like, hey John, the third person this week asked for feature X. What other questions do you want me to ask the next person who talks about it, so that you can start thinking about how we're going to design it.
And that's kind of funny, when support would come in, like, after 3 or 4 repeated requests, I was like, you know what? Like, I used to get support emails and be like, God, why are all these people complaining about this? But now, it was great. I was like, well, I'm just gonna build it out and deploy it, because I can do it right then. I didn't have to schedule it to get deployed in some release. I didn't have to talk to a designer and go through this whole process. I was just like, you know what? I can spend an hour and just build this and deploy it. It won't be perfect, but that 50% good enough version usually was good enough to stop support emails about it. Like, I was like, hey, all right. They just support emails about it anymore. So that's the other learning we would kind of do.
Yeah, that's true too. Yeah, so we put our KISS Insights, our ghetto MVP version up on KISS Metrics, and we had a question that said, is this report clear? And so then people were looking at the report right then and looking at our survey, and whatever things they were baffled by, they could just immediately type in. We don't know what the heck that first graph on the page does. Yeah, no one does. That's why that first graph on the page is going away. So that'll be that'll probably be the first most visible feature that's going to get pulled back.
Yeah.
Because no one uses it.
John,
Don't like it, but that's not no.
So aside from the customer support emails, what's the best way you found to engage your customers to get actual insights and interviews and sitting down with them or talking to them on the phone or email?
I call them up. I send them an email saying, hi, I'd like to talk to you. It'll take 10 to 15 minutes. And I give them 4 choices of times. That way they only have to make one decision, pick one. And then, I just call them up. I usually ask them, what are you doing with metrics today? Just a really open-ended question. And most people will talk for about 5 minutes about what they're doing and what their current frustrations are. Even people who don't seem like they'd be really outgoing, it's just, kind of this rant. And then based on that, I can kind of ask additional questions about what tools are you using. If you had a magic wand, what kind of things would you know about your customers, your data? How's the workflow? Are you the person doing this, or do you work with other people? But basically, it's a pretty flexible interview format. It just varies depending on what people are telling me.
People always have to play.
Yeah.
So I have a question on early adopters versus your general audience, right? So I would say in some cases you have the profile of the early adopter that's most likely to kind of, it's going to be a low barrier for them to use your product versus something else, or change their behavior. Would you say, how do you deal with that problem? What I mean specifically is, do you do a different set of development questions and things like that with your early adopters? You develop this product and you're like, okay, now how do I mass market this? And then how do I figure out, where that hurdle is going to be crossed? How would you go about doing something like that?
So what we did is, he mentioned that we asked people to screencast. We actually were lucky that we really support that, but it's not at all intuitive in the interface. And after watching about 10 of those, it became really clear what people needed to do. And one of the most interesting things for me is that just from watching it, I could see that people were going back and forth between tabs because they don't remember what the funnel is they want to measure. And so I said, we need to build something, a first user experience that guides them through. So that was one of our first customer archetype assumptions that turned out to be wrong. We thought people would know exactly what they wanted to measure. Not the case. People need a little bit of guidance there. So we got out an MVP that did not have any kind of guiding first user experience, and that was fine because we self-selected the first people who came in. They were people who were used to reading manuals and bugging people until they had things figured out. But to get from the early adopter beta to the later adopter beta, we're actually in development right now of a kind of hand-holding wizard-based, here's what you want to measure on your site, here's how you find that information, a lot of drop-downs, a lot of selections versus go read the API documentation. So there's that. Versus what questions do I ask? I do kind of switch gears. I have questions that I'm more likely to ask newer people. It's more about workflow. If you need something done, who do you talk to? What are the obstacles between you and getting this thing done? For example, one of the biggest things is the not wanting to bug my engineers hurdle. That's actually a really huge feature. I'm giving you that for free. Anyone who has a web app, if you can do something to reduce the amount of times the product manager has to ask their engineer for something, they will love you for that. But yeah, I kind of play it by ear. I probably have a list of 20 to 30 questions that I might ask, depending on how the conversation goes and what
we've got a B2C app for June, going out in June. One of my concerns is if we put an MVP out, the type of application we have requires you to refer people into it and talk about it, so it's sort of a social style app. But have you advice from your experience in terms of how you manage that chatter and bloggers and things like that? And do you use messaging strategies, or you just constrain the private beta such that it doesn't get out into the universe that you've got a crap product and no one should use it? Because I'm concerned we'll have one or two goes at it, you know what I mean? Because we'll have no reputation of base to build from, it's not an additional feature, it's the product. And
Right.
you don't want, someone at TechCrunch saying this is rubbish and no one should bother with it.
Nobody cared.
That's probably true for
Nobody
one
cared.
thing.
It took me a long time to figure that out. Nobody cared. Like, you
So
can put it out there. I mean, the best thing is if someone actually writes about it, because that means they care enough to actually take some time and write about it. So I actually look at that as a positive thing, especially if you're intentionally trying to keep it closed. So a lot of our stuff, you'll see it closed, right? Because it's not because of this reason. It's just because we're iterating and opening it up makes it so John has literally to be in a box and you can code all day.
Right, and we get support emails from people who probably aren't our target market, and that slows us down. But we've gotten negative tweets. We've gotten people who've written blog posts saying, this thing sucks. And, I usually respond. I'll say, address the specific thing, like, oh, I'm sorry, this wasn't working for you. Feel free to email me, and I give my email address. And sometimes they do, and sometimes I have a great conversation wherein they're either not our target customer, or actually the thing that they complained about we actually do support, and maybe just the UI needs fixing. And sometimes they don't, and then that doesn't really matter. But
I'd say in my experience, like in B2C, you have that problem much less.
yeah.
Like B2B, it's huge because you have businesses using it, and if you fail, it's a big deal, or a bigger deal because some businesses are pissed off. But in B2C, it's like a consumer, right? What are they gonna be mad about? They're usually you're trying to entertain them, right? Yeah, they'll take.
I understand the fear for sure. But also, I wonder if you're more afraid that you're going to spend X more months development and then find out if it's going to work. You know what I'm saying? That's my fear.
The best answer is get over it, right?
Yeah, I think we've probably gotten 1%, if that, cranks versus 99% who think, oh, this thing is cool. So.
Well, then on a similar vein, and I assume you'll answer it the same way, what about the competitive issues of competitors finding out what you're about to do or thinking about doing and putting it in there?
If you're learning fast, it doesn't really matter.
Competitors don't know what we're about to do because what we're about to do is in our customer notes head. I mean, we're doing customer interviews. We're not out. Our roadmap isn't published anywhere. And in terms of when there are competitors doing similar things, you can build the same products, but you can't replicate the process as easily. So if you are doing customer development, if you're interviewing people and listening to them and making them feel like an expert and that you care about them, that's going to win someone over, even if the product doesn't work for them. I've had people who came in use the beta, said, you know what, I don't think this is for me, and I'll talk to him and say, you know what, you're probably right, but I'll email you in like 4 to 6 months when we've got it to a point where it's going to be right for you. And, you know, I get really great response to that. You're like, wow, you know, I'm amazed that you cared enough to follow up instead of just ignoring that.
As an entrepreneur, you're always care about competitors. Like, it's just it's your competitive nature, right? But I think ultimately, like, if you're focused on the customer, I know a lot of people say this, but truly, if you're focused on the customer, doing your customer development, and really trying to solve their pains, that matters more than anything else. I mean, we've got competitors, and what I've noticed about most of them is they're targeting a different customer, right? And that's what I've ended up noticing. And so I don't think any of us care about each other anymore. And at the end of the day, in most markets, the more people there are, and the more opportunity there is, the more people are talking to customers. Great.
Yeah.
You know, customers get to choose. That's the world we're in today.
I think people overestimate that value of that first mover advantage. I mean, you look at there's plenty of examples out there. I mean, when Google launched, I mean, like Google is like the search engine now. When they launched, there were plenty of search engines. I mean, like Alta Vista and Infosys and all these things. They entered into a crowded market. You know, but so I mean, I think we overvalue that first mover advantage. I think the more important thing is not who got there first, but who could integrate faster after that.
Can you talk a little bit about customer acquisition and what you're doing marketing-wise to acquire customers?
We're not actively looking for customers.
Okay.
Like, we get customers coming to us. We have a sign-up form and a survey. We're actually not actively trying to aggressively bring customers into our platform. We're still learning too much to afford to do that in our business. Like, we'll hit scaling problems if we get too many customers.
How do you get a niche of customer base to that's the MVP? Do you do like $10 ads?
Yeah. So the way we do it is probably not likely for most people. We have a previous analytics product. We have lots of users on it. We have a number of things we do. But I think for most people, it's my short answer is any way you can. So one would be there's a lot of markets or types of products where stumble upon ads would work really well. It's 5 cents a visitor. We actually still do that right now for certain things. I think AdWords is possible, but depending on how many customers you need. If you're willing to pay $20 per customer because your market, that's okay. Or to learn, you need to do that. That's fine. You can do it with AdWords, right? Or doing $100. One key thing that I don't see enough people doing that I would do is go to forums, and I've said this a few times, but before, but go to a forum and just try to buy an ad spot for a week, and then do a custom deal. Anywhere where you can actually negotiate the price, you're likely to get a better ROI. It takes more work and it takes a little bit more thinking, but that would be what I would recommend in most ideas when you're bootstrapping or don't have that much money.
And if you're looking to do validation, you should be where your customers are anyways. I had a great interview yesterday with this guy from a web analytics mailing list. Never talked to him before, but he was railing about some problem in Google Analytics, and I just emailed him and I was like, hi, can I talk to you about this? You know, I'm not trying to sell you anything, I just want to understand what the problem is. And I had an awesome conversation, or I guess a very one-sided conversation, in which he gave me incredible detail, exactly what he wanted to do, what the problem was, what he wished it would do, and, you know, what kind of product he would pay for that would solve this. And, you know, I wasn't offering him anything in regard. I think he just wanted to vent.
And I don't think he's even participating in the list, he's just watching the list.
Yeah, I just watched the list. And
I watch the same list.
Yeah, and I do the same thing with Twitter. If I see someone tweeting about something that's sort of tangentially related, I'll just go out and say, hey, can I talk to you? And most of the time, people like feeling like experts. And especially if they have pain, they like to talk about that pain. So, you know, be a willing ear.
I'm going to cut it out there. So everyone, let's thank KISS Metrics. We've got drinks sponsored by KISS Metrics at the ramp, which is about 2 blocks away. And when you're walking out the door right there, there's a table set up with directions. So you can just grab some directions and we'll see everyone over at the ramp. So thanks for coming.